Okay, here we are in chapter 2 on the integers, and this is section 2.3, subtracting integers. So subtraction, what is it? Well, it's really just adding. The opposite is how we're going to look at this. So if a and b are integers, if we have the expression a minus b, we're going to change that to a plus the opposite of b, or a plus a negative b. And so we're just adding the opposite. So we've just done that in section 2.2, and so that's not a problem. So let's look here. 5 minus 9. Okay, well, first we're going to rewrite this. 5 plus the opposite of 9. Now we know if we're adding opposites, we take the larger one without the sign, which is 9, subtract the smaller one, which is 5, so we get 4, and we take the sign of the larger, so that's negative, and we get a negative 4. Okay. Now what about this one? Negative 12 minus 16. Well, again, we're going to change it to negative 12 plus a negative 16. So that just changes that to this part. And remember, we don't write plus minus right by each other. We'll put a plus and then parentheses, then the negative 16 inside of parentheses. Now here we have like signs. So we know if we have like signs, we can just add 12 plus 16. We get 18 and we get 2. And so then we say, okay, well, the final answer has the sign that was in both of those. So we prefix it with a negative and put our 28. All right. Now, we have a negative 120 plus a negative, or minus, excuse me, a negative 118. Well, what do we know from the last section about two negatives together? Well, a negative and a negative make a positive. So now what we really have is negative 120 plus 118. Now this is kind of in the format, we're used to with adding. And so we can take the larger one, which is the 120, subtract the smaller one, which is 118. And when we do that, that's a 1, the 8 here, that's 2. And so we get 2, but the prefix is the large sign, and that was a negative. And so we get the negative 2. All right, so the next one here, we've got a lot of negatives, so we have to kind of go through it. This is just negative 4. Now we have minus a negative 8, so that becomes plus because we have negative, negative, that becomes plus. And then this here is going to become plus a negative 12. So what we're going to have is negative 4 plus 8 plus a negative 12. Now we can do multiple things here. We can add from left to right. Or if you remember from previously, we can rearrange and say, well, we want to add these two together first because, well, they're both negative. And then after that, add the 8. So if we do that, let's bring our 8 out front. Then we're going to add to that, well, minus 4 minus 12. We have the same sign. So we just add those two together. So we have 16. And we prefix it with the sign, which is negative. And so this whole thing now has become 8 plus a negative 16, or, originally it would have been 8 minus 16, but we're going to change it to 8 plus a negative 16. Now we take the larger one, 16, subtract the smaller, which is 8. That's 8. And so now we take the prefix of the larger, so it's a negative 8. Now this one looks like we have the negative, negative, but we have to remember if we're doing that, we have to distribute both of them. So maybe what we'll do is we'll work in here first. And so if we do that, we have a negative 5 equals, and then minus, and then we have negative 3 plus a negative 4. Now those are the same signs. We can just add, well, 3 plus 4 is 7. So I can say, well, that's a negative 5 minus. It's a 7, but we have to prefix it with a negative, so it's actually a negative 7. Now we've got the negative, negative together, and so that becomes positive. And so now we have a negative 5 plus 7. And so what we can do is we can take the larger minus the smaller, we get 2. And the 7 is positive, so we just get 2 in this case for our answer. Okay, so that's how we can add or subtract by changing it to adding the opposite. All right, change is a difference. So to measure the change in a quantity, what we usually do is we take the latter measurement minus the former measurement. So what that looks like is they'll ask, what is the change in something? And then we'll say, okay, well, this was the last measurement they gave us. This was the first measurement. The latter minus the former, and then that gives us the change. Because we're wanting to know change from morning to afternoon or afternoon to night. And so we need to know which one's first, which one's second. For example, when you leave the house in the morning, it's Fahrenheit. When you get home, the temperature is 4 degrees. What is the change in temperature? Well, okay, which one is the latter measurement? Well, the latter one is 94 degrees Fahrenheit because that in the afternoon. And we're going to subtract off the former, which is the beginning one. We're going to say, okay, well, we're going to minus, and then we have our 50 here. Now we're going to change it to 94 plus of the negative 50. And so now we know if we're doing that, we're adding opposites. 94 minus 50. And that goes 4. 9 minus 5 is 4. And so that gives us 44 degrees Fahrenheit is the change in temperature. And what happened is it increased in temperature, went from 50 to 94, so we got a positive number, which is what we would expect. All right, so now the temperature at noon is 88 degrees Fahrenheit. The temperature at 6 p.m. is 60 degrees Fahrenheit. What is the change in temperature? Well, now this is the latter. We're going to take 60 minus the former, which is 88. Well, that's going to give us 60 plus the opposite of 88. We're going to go larger, 88 minus the smaller, 60. 8 minus 0 is 8. 8 minus 6 is 2. And so this becomes 28. But our larger sign is negative, so it's a negative 28 degrees Fahrenheit. So what happened here is the temperature dropped from what it was at noon to what it was in the afternoon at 6 p.m. And so that's what we'd expect. We'd expect a negative number because it's gone down. Okay? And so that's how you have to kind of look at this. The beginning one is lower, the later one is higher. We should get a positive number because we've gone up. And if our beginning was higher and our afternoon one was lower, we should get a negative because our temperature dropped. Okay, so that's how the change in quantity works. So I'll stop there and come back in a little bit.